The first sign was the perfume. I didn't smell it on her clothes, but rather in our bedroom, like an intruder had come and gone, leaving only a taunting trace behind. Rachel had never been one for floral scents. Her perfume was always something subtle, clean, a faint whisper, not a bold statement. But this was different. Loud, musky, exotic. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off. Must be the new cleaning lady, she said, barely glancing up from her phone. Her voice was smooth, practiced. I watched her for a long moment. The way her shoulders didn't tense and how she didn't even blink, not a single crack in her composure. It almost made me doubt my own suspicions. But there were other signs too. I noticed she'd been taking extra care with her appearance, little things that she used to overlook when she was just going to the office. Red lipstick that she'd never worn before, dresses that clung a little too tight, heels that were a little too high. She always looked like she was heading somewhere important, somewhere she needed to be noticed. Still, I held back, convincing myself I was imagining it all. Years of marriage don't dissolve overnight. At least, that's what I thought. It all came crashing down one Friday night. She'd gone out with friends, something she'd been doing more often lately. Around midnight, she still wasn't home, and her phone calls went unanswered. A burning sense of dread gnawed at me, but I stayed calm, waiting. When she finally walked through the door, her hair was disheveled, lipstick smeared just slightly at the corner of her mouth. The scent of that same floral perfume clung to her skin. "Long night?" I asked, my voice steady, but my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "Yeah," she mumbled, tossing her purse on the couch without even looking at me. She started walking toward the bathroom. "Who's he, Rachel?" I didn't shout. I didn't have to. The words hung heavy in the air, loaded with all the unasked questions and quiet suspicions that had been piling up for weeks. Her shoulders stiffened, just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. She turned, eyes narrowing, an unspoken challenge in her gaze. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me," I said, voice like iron. I took a step closer. "You think I haven't noticed the perfume, the late nights, the excuses? Tell me who he is, Rachel." A flash of defiance sparked in her eyes. For a moment, I thought she might confess, let it all out in one cathartic release. Instead, she tilted her head, a mocking smile curling at the corners of her mouth. "Maybe you're just paranoid. You're so busy with work, you're starting to imagine things." Her tone was dismissive, almost pitying. "Imagining things?" I repeated, the anger rising in my chest like a tidal wave. "Don't insult me, Rachel. I know there's someone else. Who is he, your coworker? Someone from your nights out with friends? Or are you just picking random strangers off the street?" Her face twisted in fury, a side of her I hadn't seen in years. "Oh, don't you dare throw this on me. You're the one who's been neglecting this marriage. I'm not the one who's been obsessed with work, staying late every other night. What did you expect me to do, just wait around while you ignored me?" "So this is my fault?" I shot back, my voice cold. "All those years, the trust, the promises, all of that meant nothing to you." She hesitated, her bravado slipping for a second. But then she shrugged, almost carelessly. "Maybe it didn't." I felt something snap inside me. Without another word, I grabbed my keys and left, needing the cool night air to clear my head. I drove, aimlessly at first, anger clouding my vision until I found myself outside a dimly lit bar. The drink burned as it slid down my throat, dulling the edges of my rage. But not enough. After an hour, I decided I was ready to go home, ready to confront her again, to end this once and for all. But as I pulled into our driveway, I saw a shadow slip out from the side gate, heading toward a sleek black car parked down the street. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, his arms still reaching out to close the gate quietly. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands clenched the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles turned white. The man turned, and for a brief moment, his eyes met mine. He froze, his face going pale under the streetlight. My rage surged, and before I knew it, I was out of the car, striding toward him. "You think you can just sneak around my house?" I growled, voice low and dangerous. He took a step back, but I closed the distance between us. "You come to my home, to my wife, and think you can just walk away." My voice was steady, even cold, but my heart was pounding with fury. He raised his hands defensively. Look, man, I didn't. But I didn't give him the chance to finish. My fist connected with his jaw, hard, sending him sprawling onto the pavement. He scrambled up, clutching his face, but I was on him again, shoving him back against the fence. You think you can take what's mine? I hissed, barely keeping the rage in check. James, stop! Her voice sliced through the night, pulling me back. I turned, breathing heavily, to see Rachel standing in the doorway, her face a mixture of horror and fury. I let go of the man, who staggered back, his face bloodied and dazed. Rachel ran to him, her hands hovering over his injuries, her concern palpable. The sight twisted something deep inside me, a final nail in the coffin of whatever we'd once had. You've made your choice, I said, my voice empty now, devoid of the anger that had been boiling over moments before. And now you can live with it. I turned and walked away, leaving them both standing there in the cold glow of the porch light. The satisfaction of the fight was fleeting, but in that moment, I knew I was done. No more questions, no more suspicions. The truth was out, and for me, that was enough. The divorce was quick, efficient even. Rachel didn't contest anything, which was a relief. We signed the papers without fanfare, the lawyer's office cold and quiet. She didn't look at me, and I didn't care to look at her. The last shred of whatever we'd shared had dissolved that night outside our house, with her holding that man's bruised face as if he were some precious thing she couldn't bear to see broken. Months passed, and I threw myself into work, rebuilding my life with a focus and intensity that helped drown out the bitterness, the betrayal. But there were reminders, small, insidious things, mutual friends who whispered, people who gave me those awkward, pitying looks. I was the wronged man, the abandoned husband, and I hated that label. I hadn't asked for pity. I hadn't asked for any of this. It was around that time that rumors started trickling back to me, fragments from friends who'd stayed neutral. Rachel wasn't doing well. Her job performance had slipped. She'd missed deadlines, taken erratic days off. She'd ended things with the man, the one I'd caught sneaking out of our home. Some said she'd been seeing other men, that she was spiraling. Some seemed to relish her misfortune, but to me, it was just a confirmation of how she'd been all along. Reckless, selfish, careless with anyone's feelings but her own. I told myself I was indifferent, that she'd made her bed, and now she could rot in it for all I cared. But I didn't expect to see her again, certainly not in the middle of a grocery store one random Tuesday evening. I was at the self-checkout, scanning items when I felt eyes on me. I looked up and froze. Rachel stood there, holding a basket with a few half-hearted groceries, wine, instant ramen, a single wilted cucumber. Her once vibrant hair looked limp. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and the confidence that used to pour out of her in waves seemed dimmed, almost beaten down. James, she said, her voice weak. There was no trace of the defiant, mocking woman I remembered. Instead, she looked worn, diminished, like someone who'd lost more than just her marriage. Part of me felt an instinctual pull, a reflex to comfort her, to fix whatever was wrong. But I stifled it quickly. Rachel, I replied curtly, turning back to the scanner. I could feel her lingering, her gaze almost pleading. Can we talk? She asked, her voice barely audible over the hum of the store. What's there to talk about? I didn't bother looking up. Please, James, just a coffee. 5 minutes, she pressed, desperation edging into her tone. Against my better judgment, I gave a curt nod. Part of me wanted to hear what excuse she could possibly have. Maybe it was morbid curiosity. Maybe it was just to finally lay everything to rest. We ended up at a small cafe around the corner, sitting at a corner table far from prying eyes. She looked out the window, her fingers tracing patterns on her coffee cup, avoiding my gaze. I'm sorry, she started, and the words were so fragile, they almost shattered in the air between us. For everything. For the way I treated you, for him. Her voice cracked, and she looked down, almost as if ashamed. Sorry doesn't fix it, Rachel, I said, my voice cold, unyielding. You threw everything we had away for what? Cheap thrills? A stranger who didn't care about you? She flinched, but she didn't look away. I know I hurt you, but I thought I could just ignore what I felt. I felt trapped, like I'd given up my own life for this perfect picture. And when I looked at you, it felt like you'd moved on, like your work was everything. I know it sounds selfish, but I was angry at you, at myself. I thought I could fill that emptiness with someone else. But it was a mistake, James. A horrible, horrible mistake. I studied her, unimpressed. I had no sympathy left to give. You didn't just make a mistake, Rachel. You made a choice. And that choice destroyed everything. She bit her lip, the anger and shame on her face twisting into something almost pitiable. I know, she whispered, her voice breaking. I lost everything and I deserved it. A flicker of satisfaction lit within me as she spoke. I'd wanted her to hurt, to understand what she'd thrown away. But as I looked at her, so hollow, so lost, it felt hollow. Why are you telling me this? I asked, finally breaking the silence. Because I wanted you to know that I'm not proud of what I did, that I understand if you hate me, but I need you to know I regret it. Every single day. Her voice cracked, and she looked down, her hands trembling. You ruined your own life, Rachel, I said, my tone unfeeling, but you won't ruin mine anymore. I left her there, sitting at the table with her head bowed, a shadow of the woman who had once shared my life. But that wasn't the end of it. A few weeks later, a call came from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered, and it was her. I could hear the quiver in her voice, a desperation that wasn't there before. James, please, can you come over? I don't have anyone else. For a moment, I almost hung up. But something about her tone stopped me. A vulnerability I'd never heard in her before, one that sounded close to terror. When I arrived at her place, the sight was staggering. Her apartment was a mess, clothes strewn everywhere, bottles lining the countertops. She looked pale, thin, almost a shadow. She had nothing of the defiance or bravado that I'd come to associate with her. Are you all right? I asked cautiously. No, she said, voice shaking. She looked up, her eyes haunted. I'm not all right, James. I've lost everything. I thought I could be free, that I'd find happiness. But all I did was ruin the one good thing I had. You, our life. She swallowed, tears spilling over. And now I'm alone, and I'm so scared. In that moment, I felt an intense, quiet satisfaction. She had made her bed, and now she was lying in it. But I wasn't there to pick up the pieces. That wasn't my job anymore. I stood unmoved and met her broken gaze. I gave you everything, Rachel, I said softly, and you chose to throw it away. Now you're feeling the cost of your choices. But that's not my burden anymore. She looked at me, her face crumbling in despair, as she understood the finality in my words. With a last glance, I walked out of her apartment, out of her life, for good. The weight of her actions was finally on her shoulders. And for the first time since that night, I felt truly free. After walking out of Rachel's apartment that night, I thought that was the end of it. I'd left her to drown in the misery she had created for herself. But as the days went by, a strange bitterness lingered in me, refusing to die. She had wrecked my life, burned everything down, and now she expected forgiveness, pity. That wasn't enough for me, not anymore. I realized I'd been naive, thinking I could just walk away and let the world settle itself. Rachel had destroyed my life so carelessly, like it was some side effect of her personal growth, and she thought I would just go along with it. But if she believed she could just pick up the pieces of her life without consequences, she was wrong. My mind spun with the ways I could ruin her in return, make her feel the devastation she had unleashed on me. I didn't just want her to regret it, I wanted her to fear it. I wanted her to suffer. The first step was simple. I started by taking back what she had taken from me, piece by piece. The first move was easy. I called her boss, Gregory, a mutual acquaintance, someone who owed me a favor from years back. Gregory was someone who valued loyalty, discretion, and, most of all, productivity. He didn't need much persuading to cut her loose, especially after I casually mentioned the mess Rachel had made of her recent projects and her problems. The call was barely 5 minutes, and just like that, her last lifeline vanished. It didn't take long for Rachel to notice. She tried calling me, but I ignored her, watching each call and message flash on my phone with a sense of dark satisfaction. I wanted her to stew in the fallout, to let the walls close in around her. I imagined her desperation, the creeping realization that her once comfortable life was slowly eroding beneath her. A few days later, I received an email, anonymous. Curious, I opened it, and what I found was nothing short of a gold mine. Attached were photos, a series of compromising images that showed Rachel with the man she'd cheated on me with. Whoever had sent it had done their homework. The photos were from their little escapades in public places, bars, restaurants, even near our old neighborhood. That was when my plan clicked into place. I forwarded the photos to every single one of Rachel's family members, making sure to include a note, "I thought you all should know what happened." Her parents were conservative, strict people who had never approved of her modern, free-spirited ways. They'd always believed she would settle down, become the wife and daughter they'd always wanted. I knew these photos would shatter whatever illusions they still held about her. Within hours, my phone buzzed again, a string of furious messages from Rachel. She didn't beg or apologize this time. She was livid, swearing at me, calling me every name in the book. I read each message slowly, savoring her anger, her desperation, but I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The final act of revenge came weeks later, calculated and perfectly timed. Rachel had lost her job, her family had cut her off, and she was burning through her savings fast. From a friend, I'd heard she'd been staying at a cheap motel, trying to find a new job, struggling just to keep afloat. I even heard rumors that her latest relationship had soured too. The man had moved on to his next conquest, leaving Rachel as just another notch on his belt. But I wasn't interested in just watching her life crumble. I wanted her to feel trapped, helpless. I'd kept tabs on her credit, watching as her debts piled up. That was when I took my revenge to the next level. Years ago, when we were still happily married, Rachel had convinced me to sign for a loan in her name, for a business venture she'd dreamed of. I'd signed it without hesitation, trusting her implicitly. Now, that loan was a weapon in my hands. I hired a lawyer and called in the debt, forcing her into default. The day after I pulled the financial rug out from under her, I showed up at the dingy motel where she was staying, just as she was being kicked out by management. Her clothes were in a heap on the ground, her face pale and hollow as she argued with the landlord. When she saw me standing there, arms crossed, a slow realization dawned on her face, and I watched the horror flood her eyes. "James," she stammered, her voice shaky, barely a whisper. "You really thought there wouldn't be consequences?" I said, my voice cold and calm. "You thought you could ruin my life and just walk away?" She shook her head, her face crumbling into a mask of despair. "Please. I have nothing left, James. I lost my job, my family. I can't survive like this." I tilted my head, feigning sympathy. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to wreck everything." Her knees buckled and she sank onto the ground, her face contorting with sobs. I let her cry, her body racked with gasps, as she realized how far she'd fallen. Every sound, every tear felt like justice, like all the pieces falling exactly where they belonged. "Please, I know I hurt you. I know I was wrong. But this, I can't take this anymore," she begged, reaching out a trembling hand toward me. I stepped back, just out of her reach. "You thought your life was yours to play with, to ruin at whim. Now you get to live with those choices." I turned to walk away, my steps slow and deliberate. She screamed after me, her voice raw, the sound of it echoing across the empty parking lot. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. A few weeks after leaving her in the motel parking lot, I felt like I'd finally closed the book on my marriage. But as I moved on, that dark satisfaction started to fade, leaving a hollow ache. It wasn't enough, not after what she'd put me through. And that's when I knew. I had to go nuclear. I'd pull every string, leave her with nothing but the rubble of her mistakes. This time, I'd make sure everyone around her saw exactly who she was. And I'd make sure there was no one left willing to save her. The first strike. Her parents. Rachel's parents, Margaret and David, were devoutly religious, highly respected in their community. They'd never quite approved of her modern choices and free-spirited ways, and while they tolerated her independence, they expected her to settle down and become a dutiful wife. They were the type who believed a woman's reputation was everything, and appearances mattered more than anything else. I took a neat package of documents I'd gathered, photos of her with her lover, a record of her recent motel bookings, and even receipts from clubs and bars she frequented, and sent them in a crisp, white envelope to Margaret and David's home. I added a letter written in plain, dispassionate language, detailing the collapse of our marriage from my perspective. I included a line that stung especially. I regret to inform you that your daughter's actions were the sole reason for this divorce. Her infidelity was not a momentary lapse, it was a lifestyle. Margaret called me the day after they received the package, her voice tight with barely suppressed anger. I don't know what to say, James. We raised her better than this, she muttered, almost as if talking to herself. She had every opportunity, every blessing, and this is what she did? I thought you should know, I replied coolly. I wanted you to understand why things ended the way they did. Her silence said it all. Rachel was about to lose the last two people who had given her any support. They were mortified, not only by her betrayal of me, but by her utter disregard for everything they'd believed in. Within days, word spread among their church and community circles. They were deeply embarrassed, and any sympathy they'd held for her evaporated. Rachel's safety net was burning away, and she hadn't even realized it yet. The second strike. Her job prospects. With her reputation ruined among those who might have supported her, I focused on her career. She was job hunting, scraping by with temporary gigs she was barely holding on to. I used a contact of mine at one of the recruiting firms she'd applied to and made it clear that hiring her would mean bad press, instability, and a nightmare to manage. My friend was more than willing to pass the warning along to other firms in the area, and within days, Rachel was blacklisted from every reputable company she'd applied to. Soon after, she tried to apply to jobs out of state, but I was already ahead of her. I set up an online profile, a fake job hunter's profile that connected to recruiters and industry professionals she might reach out to. When she applied, I made sure they received anonymous tips with records of her past projects, doctored just enough to look like she'd failed spectacularly, along with mentions of her erratic behavior and personal issues. It wasn't long before she was receiving rejections left and right, her savings dwindling, her once bright future collapsing into ashes. She was running out of options, and she had no idea that every door was shutting because of me. The final blow. Exposing her to everyone. By now, Rachel was a shell of herself, isolated, struggling, and paranoid. The family she'd betrayed had cut her off. Her former friends had distanced themselves. She was alone, but I wanted to make sure she knew why her life had fallen apart. I set up a meeting with her, choosing a small, nondescript cafe where we wouldn't draw attention. She arrived looking haggard, her once pristine appearance now worn and frail. She dropped into the seat across from me, her eyes wide and hollow. "James, what do you want?" Her voice was barely a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would shatter her. I took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the moment. "I wanted to see how you're doing. How's the job hunt?" She flinched, her mouth twisting into a bitter scowl. "It's been hard. Every time I think I'm getting somewhere, something blocks me." "Funny how that works," I said, barely containing my smirk. Her eyes narrowed. What do you mean by that?" "Rachel," I said, leaning forward, "you didn't think I'd just let you ruin my life and walk away, did you?" Her face paled, realization dawning in her eyes. "What did you do?" "Nothing you didn't bring on yourself," I replied. "You see, every job rejection, every door that's closed in your face, that's because I made sure everyone knew exactly who you are. The person you hid behind charm and lies, she's out there now for everyone to see." She clenched her fists, her voice barely more than a choked whisper. "You destroyed my life." "No, Rachel," I corrected, smiling. "You destroyed your life. I just took away the safety nets you never deserved. I made sure everyone sees you for the person you are, the woman who ruined a marriage for cheap thrills and left a trail of lies behind her. Now you get to live with it. Tears streamed down her face as she struggled to keep herself together. But I wasn't done yet. You're going to find out what it feels like to be truly alone, Rachel. No friends, no family, no career. Every door will close on you because you chose this. So, enjoy your freedom. This is the life you wanted, isn't it? She shook her head, barely able to meet my gaze. Please, James, I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix what you did. It doesn't erase the betrayal, the lies, the utter disregard you had for anyone but yourself. Now, you can live with that knowledge every single day. I stood, leaving her slumped in the chair, her shoulders hunched in defeat, her face crumpled in despair. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. She had taken everything from me once, but I had given it all back tenfold. Rachel had no family, no friends, no future, nothing left to rebuild, and that was exactly how I wanted it. As I left her broken and alone, I knew the final act of revenge had played out perfectly. She was finally paying for the life she'd tried to ruin, and as I stepped back into the sunlight, I felt free, finally rid of the weight she had tried to place on me. This time I was done for good.